You know, CRISPR, when I first heard that word, I gotta be honest, I thought it was something straight out of science fiction.
It does have a kind of sci-fi ring to it, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, we're talking about editing the code of life here, right?
Yeah.
But what I found even wilder was that it all stems from, get this, bacteria.
It's true. Bacteria might seem kind of simple, but they've been in this epic battle with viruses for billions of years. And CRISPR, or more specifically the CRISPR-Cas9 system, is like their secret weapon.
Okay, so break this down for me. How does it work exactly? I get the whole DNA thing, but the nitty-gritty details, that's where I get lost.
Imagine, if you will, Cas9 as a pair of teeny tiny, like molecular scissors, but incredibly precise.
Okay, tiny scissors, I'm with you.
These scissors, they can cut DNA at a very specific spot, right? And they know where to go because they're guided by a little piece of RNA. Think of it like an address label on a package. It tells the Cas9 exactly where to go, which gene to snip.
So scientists figured out how to control this whole molecular package delivery system.
Exactly. We basically hijacked bacteria's defense mechanism. Pretty ingenious, right?
That's insane. So we can just tell these Cas9 scissors to go to any gene we want and, what, just snip it out?
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that, but you've got the right idea. We can target specific genes and edit them. And we're not just talking about bacteria here. We can do this in plants, animals, and yes, even humans.
Okay, now that is both mind-blowingly cool and a little bit terrifying, don't you think? The possibilities, the what-ifs. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about the potential benefits, because you were really interested in how CRISPR could cure genetic diseases, right?
Absolutely.
The idea of wiping out diseases that have plagued us for centuries, it's almost unbelievable.
It is remarkable. Take cystic fibrosis, for instance.
Floor-breaking disease.
It is. And it's caused by just one faulty gene, one little error in the DNA. But with CRISPR, we could theoretically go in and correct that faulty gene, address the root cause of the problem.
Okay, that's incredible. But how do you actually get CRISPR to the right cells? You can't just, like, inject it into the bloodstream and hope for the best, right?
You're right. Delivery is one of the big challenges, especially when you're talking about something like cystic fibrosis, where the faulty gene is affecting cells deep inside the lungs.
Tricky.
Researchers are working on some really innovative delivery methods, though, like using special viruses, harmless ones, of course, as delivery vehicles. These viruses act like Trojan horses, carrying the CRISPR system directly to the target cells.
So these viruses sneak in and deliver a genetic fix right to the source of the problem.
Precisely.
It's like we're on the cusp of a medical revolution.
It's incredibly exciting, and it goes beyond just fixing what's broken. CRISPR could also help us enhance our natural defenses against disease.
You're talking about cancer, right?
Right.
I read something about how CRISPR could supercharge our immune systems to fight cancer cells more effectively.
You're exactly right. Cancer cells, they're sneaky. They're really good at hiding from our immune system. Right. But with CRISPR, we can actually edit our immune cells, make them way better at spotting and destroying those cancer cells. And what's really amazing is that we're already seeing this in action. There are early clinical trials right now testing CRISPR-based cancer therapies in humans.
Wow, so the future is happening now. And to think, all of this started with figuring out how bacteria fight off viruses. Talk about finding inspiration in unexpected places. But we've mainly focused on medicine so far. CRISPR can be used for other things too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Its applications extend far beyond medicine. Agriculture is one area with huge potential.
Right. I have to admit that wasn't something I'd really considered before, but you sent over an article about it, and it's fascinating.
It really is. Imagine crops that are resistant to pests and diseases, or that can thrive in really tough conditions like during a drought. CRISPR could completely revolutionize our food supply.
More resilient crops, higher yields, that could be game-changing for global food security.
Sure.
It's incredible to think that one tool could have such a huge impact on so many different fields. But, and I think this is super important to acknowledge, with great power comes, well, you know the rest.
Great responsibility.
Exactly. We can't just talk about all the cool things CRISPR can do without addressing the ethical concerns, right? Because I don't think it's hard to imagine this technology being misused, especially when you start talking about editing the human germline.
You're right. It's a complex issue with huge ethical implications.
And this is where things get really interesting.
They do indeed. But before we dive headfirst into the ethics of editing the human genome, let's start by defining what germline editing even means.
Okay, germline editing, it sounds kind of ominous, to be honest. What does it actually mean, though, when we're talking about CRISPR?
So, in the simplest terms, imagine you make a change to the DNA of an embryo or even sperm or egg cells, right?
Okay.
Those changes, they wouldn't just affect that one individual, but they would get passed down to their kids and then their grandkids and so on down the line.
Whoa, so we're talking about, like, altering the entire course of human evolution.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal. I can definitely see how that opens up a whole can of ethical worms. I mean, where do you even begin to draw the line?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that has bioethicists seriously concerned. You have this incredible potential to eliminate genetic diseases, but at what cost? The potential for misuse is huge.
Right, like what's to stop someone from trying to create, like, designer babies with specific traits? It starts to sound a little too much like a Black Mirror episode, honestly.
Well, and the thing is, it's not just science fiction anymore. Back in 2018, there was this scientist in China who actually used CRISPR to edit the genomes of twin embryos.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, his goal was to make them resistant to HIV. The scientific community was not okay with it, to say the least. It was a major ethical line that was crossed, and it really highlighted the need for stricter oversight and regulations.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. It just goes to show you how fast this technology is moving. We're almost playing catch up with the ethics.
It's true. We need to make sure that ethics can keep pace with the science. And even beyond the whole germline editing debate, there are other risks to consider with CRISPR. Like you mentioned, off-target effects earlier.
Right, I came across that term in my research, but I wasn't totally clear on what it meant.
So picture this. CRISPR is really precise, but it's not perfect. There's always a slight chance that those Cas9 scissors, they might cut the DNA in a slightly different spot than intended.
Oh, yeah.
And those unintended edits, we call those off-target effects, and those can have unpredictable consequences.
So it's like accidentally hitting replace all instead of just fixing a single typo in a document. But in this case, the document is our DNA, which is kind of a big deal.
Exactly. A tiny mistake in the human genome could snowball into something much bigger, maybe even lead to other diseases. That's why it's so crucial that we do tons of research and rigorous safety testing before even thinking about using CRISPR therapies widely.
It really highlights how complex the human genome is, too. We're still just scratching the surface of understanding how it all works. It's like we've been handed these incredibly powerful scissors, but we're still figuring out how to use them safely.
That's a good way to put it. And that brings us to another really important point about CRISPR: the potential to make existing social inequalities even worse.
Right, because even if we solve the safety and effectiveness issues, there's still the question of access.
Exactly. CRISPR therapies, at least initially, are probably going to be really expensive. So realistically, will only the wealthy be able to afford to correct genetic predispositions to disease? Will we end up with a future where the rich can basically buy genetic advantages while the poor are left behind? It's a scary thought. We already see so much inequality in healthcare, and CRISPR could make it so much worse if we aren't really, really careful. It's almost like we're at a crossroads with this technology. There's all this potential for good curing diseases, improving food security, maybe even shaping the future of humanity. But there are also massive risks to individuals and to society. So where do we go from here? So much to unpack there, but running out of time. We've talked about the potential of CRISPR and the ethical tightrope that comes with it, but where do we go from here? How do we make sure this technology is used for good?
The million-dollar question, right.
Huh.
The good news is we're already having this conversation. Scientists, ethicists, policymakers, everyone's trying to figure out how to handle this, set some ground rules.
Okay, that's good to hear. So are there any actual regulations in place right now? Like, what's the law say?
Lots of countries are working on it, especially the whole germline editing thing. That's a big one. Some countries have outright banned using CRISPR to make inheritable changes to human embryos. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But this feels like something we need everyone on board for, you know? Global cooperation kind of thing.
Absolutely. International guidelines, that's the ideal. We need to be on the same page because this tech, it's not limited by borders.
It's mind-boggling, really. This one tool, it's making us question what it even means to be human. If we can edit our own blueprint, are we directing our own evolution? It's kind of a heavy thought.
No doubt about it. It's a profound concept. CRISPR isn't just a tool. It's like holding a mirror up to ourselves.
Yeah.
Our values, our hopes, even our fears, it all comes into play. What matters most to us? That's the question we have to ask.
It's a test, almost, of our wisdom, our ethics. Can we handle this kind of power?
I like that, a test. And the way we pass or fail, that'll determine the future of CRISPR, maybe even humanity.
Wow. I gotta say, though, even with all the risks, I'm strangely optimistic. There's so much good that can be done. If we do this right, the possibilities are incredible.
I agree. CRISPR gives us a real shot at ending suffering, reaching our full potential, maybe even creating a better world. But it takes careful thought, open discussion, and never forgetting those ethical lines we talked about.
Well said. This is a conversation that needs to continue long after this deep dive is over, because the future isn't set in stone. CRISPR gives us choices, and those choices, they come with a heavy responsibility. We get to decide what comes next.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
Thank you so much for joining us today, for lending your expertise to this incredibly complex topic. This has been a wild ride into the world of CRISPR, and to all of you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, left you with more questions than answers, because that's what this is all about. It's the questions we ask that will shape the future. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.